show you is if we are using that multi-note bass like that, is another good tip is let me actually show you this in MB so we can see all. So this one doesn't necessarily need it either, but let's say you are making that bass and you can see it peaking when only certain notes hit. That's like a perfect time to also use an MB, multiband. Another way to do this too is using Pro Q3. It actually has a really amazing dynamic EQ. Let me show you this in the context of our lead with our current track. So this is a good example of a lead that's super dynamic where we do want to control certain frequencies, but only when they're hitting. So I'm going to go ahead and put a Pro Q3 on here. I already have one, but I'm going to throw a new one on just to show you. Jake's asking, instead of limiting, can you separate different channels for the different notes and set them to different levels or EQ them differently? You could, but that's going to get really tedious. If I tried to separate every note of this bass and then manually adjust the gain, you could, but it's just, yeah, way too tedious. Again, I think it'd be way easier just to throw it through a limiter or a multiband compressor and just have that doing all the work for you versus trying to stitch together each note individually like that. I'd say make the plugins work for you in that case. So let's see if we can find a take that's a little more aggressive. So that's good. I'm actually noticing in this case, for instance, there's a little bit of low mud happening. Yeah, maybe right there. Yeah, so that's getting a little resonant, just that G sharp it looks like. So traditionally what you might do here, right, is you would provide like a low cut, or sorry, just a little notch. And that would work, but the problem is that's going to be taking out that frequency the entire duration of when that sound plays, right? It's taking it out there, it's taking it out here. And in some cases you want that, but in some cases, maybe it's only a problematic frequency on some instances of the take. So this is where it's really nice to set a dynamic EQ instead of just dipping. So using Pro Q3, you can drag this down right here. And now it's setting a dynamic EQ instead of a cut. As you can see, this guy's still up here. So we're not actually cutting any. We're basically telling it when it exceeds this threshold, bring it down this amount of gain reduction, this amount of decibels. And by doing this again, it makes it so it's going to respond differently to every hit. And also it's going to be dynamic, right? So as soon as that part of the frequency is no longer too loud, it's going to bring that frequency back. Versus if I cut that completely, we could end up making our sound too thin with too many cuts. So in this case, I haven't sidechained this yet to a kick just because we didn't end up doing that yesterday. But so let me show you an example about how you might do that on the drums as well. And I think a common question too is, would you want to use dynamic EQ or multiband? And technically, they're both doing very, very similar things. I think the main advantage with using multiband is you have more control of the settings with attack and release.